Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to this session. My name's Eamonn Forde. I'm a music business journalist. I write for various people, including IQ and The Guardian and The Big Issue. Buy The Big Issue. It's 25th anniversary this week, so go and buy The Big Issue. Anyway, I'm not here to sell The Big Issue, literally or figuratively. I'm here to introduce a panel of experts, and we're going to talk about, we've got a tongue twister, which if you've got a cotton mouth, you probably can't say localism and community very quickly. So I've said that, I've got through that hurdle, that's fine. I am going to shut up now, and I'm going to get our experts to quickly introduce themselves, say who they are, where they're from, and then we're going to talk about lots of these issues. I'm going to leave plenty of time for questions from the audience, so if there is something that somebody says or something that somebody doesn't say, then probably the last 15 minutes of the session will be the time to do that. I just realised I've got a little mic stand here. I feel like a kind of budget Freddie Mercury. I should have kind of the whole bit coming out, but that's a horrible image for you. Let's go to the experts and end my rambling. So if you guys can all quickly introduce yourselves and give a little bit of context of where you work and where your venue sits inside the local community, and then we can kind of go into more specific questions. Okay.
Sure. My name's Barney Jeavons. I'm from the West End Centre in Aldershot. It's an army town, or it grew up as an army town in the north of Hampshire. We're actually part of a wider charity called the Hampshire Cultural Trust, which runs 26 museums and venues. There's 3 art centres and mostly museums. My personal backstory is that I used to be a self-employed promoter. I've been a stage manager, tour manager, lighting engineer, all of that stuff, played in bands, been a programmer, been a local arts development officer. I've done all of those sort of clearing up venues jobs, and essentially I'm still doing it. I also managed a band called Rubens, so I've seen quite a lot of different parts of the country and different promoters. I've seen it from lots of different angles. In terms of our relationship to the community, we've kind of got, there's big things pointing us at stuff, so artistic strategies and those sort of businesses, and there's also local needs, and we try and respond to those, but I'll go more into that with questions.
Okay, next.
My name's Mal Campbell. I am the in-house promoter of the Trades Club, which is a 200 capacity venue in Hebden Bridge, West Yorkshire. Hebden Bridge is like halfway between Leeds and Manchester, near Halifax, around back there. It's known for having the highest population of lesbians in Europe, quite a large hippie population, and flooding. The flooding.
If a rap from UKIP was here, they would link the lesbian community and the flooding.
Yeah, I was going to say flooding of biblical proportions. Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I'm on this panel, because when we were flooded 10 months ago on Boxing Day, the town was cut off for a few days. The roads were blocked, the train lines were blocked. All you could hear were the sound of air-sea rescue helicopters flying overhead. And the venue became essentially like a volunteer station and a soup kitchen for volunteers and people who had lost their shops and homes for a few days. Following that, we kind of morphed into a fundraising venue where I basically moved out every booking I could from January, and we had a series of fundraisers where we basically just reached out to our friends in the industry. Edwyn Collins came and played, Laura Marling played, Tim Burgess played, various people. We raised a lot of money. We had a record fair for our local record store, which they lost their business. And again, we had all this stuff like signed Smith's albums sort of coming to my front door, and unfortunately I had to pass them on to the record fair. So anyway, the Trades Club was essentially a community hub that I inherited, but it's been my job to keep that in place, so that plate spinning, but also attract really brilliant artists to the venue and just kind of basically kind of keep everybody happy. We're not the same as a lot of music venues in that, you know, if it's a sold-out gig, but someone is being homophobic at the bar, that's not a good gig for me. You know, so we have ethics and ideals that we want everyone to buy into, and that's as much as just as important as the shows that we put on.
Okay, that's proper community spirit there. Okay, next.
Hi, Rebecca Walker here from. Thank you. Rebecca Walker here from the Leadmill in Sheffield. We are a 250 up to 900 capacity venue. With different capacities in between there. We can cater to 400, 600 by closing off various avenues in our building. We were established in 1980. I wasn't there in 1980, but there were people there in 1980. And it started off just a bunch of guys on the dole who wanted to bring a community kind of arts scene into Sheffield. They all put together. It was funded a lot by the Arts Council and different funding bodies that were around in the 80s. But then it's now a fully corporate, well, not corporate, but it's a fully profit-making business now. We're not funded by any kind of charitable or funding bodies. It's all just us, a little team at the top of this old flour mill in Sheffield. So yeah, that's us. In terms of what we bring to the community, I would say we're integral in bringing the touring market to Sheffield, whether that is live music or clubs. In the 90s, we were very big in the clubbing scene, kind of rivaling with Ibiza in a lot of ways with what we had. Noughties and the 80s, it was very much bands. Now we're even seeing comedians. So we've recently had the privilege of Jason Manford, Eddie Izzard, who has come to smaller venues and doing the smaller venue circuit, when we all know that these kind of artists can sell much bigger shows, and we're now welcoming back what they used to do in the 80s, welcoming back a lot of theatre, welcoming back a lot of film. We're starting working with a lot of classical groups. We're starting that bridge. So yeah, we're not just a nightclub and an indie venue anymore. We're trying to go back to what we were in the 80s and kind of widen our kind of horizon and all-encompassing with a lot of different kinds of arts now.
Bring back Thatcherism, that's what you're saying. No,
Yeah.
don't bring back Thatcherism. And finally...
Hi, I'm Jane Beese. I'm the head of music here at the Roundhouse. I've been in post here for about a year now. We're celebrating a couple of birthdays this year, so just to give you a brief history of the building, it's our 10th year since we refurbished. So all of the new space that you see, all of Maid, Talkwills, that was built 10 years ago. And it's also 50 years last weekend since we were first used as an art space. When Talkwill Norman bought the empty shell of the Roundhouse about 16 or 17 years ago, he knew we needed a big commercial space upstairs, but he also wanted to create the Roundhouse Studios, which I also sometimes refer to as the best kept secret in London. I don't know if anybody's here has been in the Roundhouse Studios. One person at the front, a couple of people that work here at the back. So the Studios is a suite of 24 rooms, which include a radio station, a recording studio, rehearsal spaces, DJ spaces. What have I missed, Peter? Bigger band spaces, rehearsal spaces. And we're working with about 3,000 young people at the moment. The only criteria to use that space and be part of the programme is that you need to be 11 to 25. There's no geographical criteria. And you sign up for £20 a year, and then you can come and use the spaces just individually, or you can sign up to one of the projects which the music team run, including Peter, who I'm embarrassing for the second time at the back there. What else do we do? The music team runs the studio projects. We also programme our own work around festivals. We have Rising Festival in February, which is our festival of emerging talent. And we had some anniversaries this year, like the punk anniversary, which Justine referred to earlier. And we also choreograph the diary, which brings in 100 gigs into the main space through your SJMs and your Killies. And that's all part of what is a very, I wouldn't say stable, but mixed economy here. When Mark and I started talking about hosting Venues Day here, I thought that there was a symbiotic relationship, not only that our ethos is very much supportive of what you all do and the lifeblood of the music business and the artists that, you know, I think as Marcus said earlier, you know, those artists would not exist selling 3,000 tickets upstairs if it wasn't for coming through your venues first. But I also wanted to sort of introduce to a lot of the regional promoters the idea of this mixed economy that we have, this slightly complex setup, but with the youth programme being very much at the centre of what we do.
Okay, thank you. Before we start, there's people at the back. There are loads of seats at the front. Come and have a seat. It's not like a stand-up gig where you'll be picked on or somebody in a clown costume is going to come out and throw a bucket of glitter over you. It's fine to sit at the front. What? Come on. We usher all the people forward. Maybe by the end we'll get them to sit down. So if we're talking about localism and community, I guess a kind of a very broad question to begin with is really how do you define your remit for your local community, and how's that changed in recent years? Because we hear a lot about gentrification of venues and this drive to attract a higher spending consumer base. So can you guys talk about kind of how you define your remit for the community and maybe how that's evolved, either being pushed by commercial reasons or internal reasons where you realise that you can kind of go into other areas?
Just picking up on that, so I would love to be able to say that the reason we do a lot of local-based projects, the reason why we give theatre groups our space and things like that is because we're lovely and we want to be able to help the community. Unfortunately, that's just a nice byproduct of why we actually do it. The reason why we're having to open our doors to a lot of diverse kind of projects is because clubs and indie bands don't pay our bills anymore. But what we did in Sheffield is identified that there was a gap in that market. There are parents that want to come and see their local bands, their kids play in local bands, whether or not they're in between the ages of 14 and 18, their parents will spend on the bar. There wasn't that much in the way of places where comedians could go in different areas, so we opened that up. There is the big cinema that's charging a fortune, but we're doing like little cult films. I would love to say the reason why we're doing this is because we want to help the local community, but essentially it's selfish reasons because we have to make our business viable. But it is a lovely thing, and it does allow us to keep open, and by being open, by doing these diverse projects, allows us to offer discount rent to local enterprises such as labels and fashion brands that can use our spaces, tattoo artists that use our spaces above our venue. We sublet a lot of studios to help those out, and in turn we use them for marketing. So there's a local clothing brand called Skull and Bones Boys Club that's very heavily integrated into the alt rock kind of world. So selfishly we give them cheap rent, but then they help us publicise shows where I don't have the market targeted. So it kind of swings both ways really there.
So I guess there's a kind of a give and take with that as well. You're kind of helping these different actors in the community kind of across these different areas, but then you're also getting something back, be that a different customer base or kind of putting you into other areas that you might not necessarily have gone into.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's kind of one hand washes the other.
Yes.
Right, okay.
The West End Centre actually started because some people had a big drama session running. They heard that they could get hold of the keys and they got in before it was given to a commercial market. So that it sort of came from this slightly maverick, anarchist point of view. They were working.
Is that something you want to kind of that spirit to live on?
I think it does, not because of me, but just because of the people who use the space. So you tend to come to it. It's a 200 capacity venue and it's got 7 rooms, and you come to it because you don't quite fit the mainstream world. So whether you're coming because it's a punk show, or whether it's because you're elderly Nepalese people who want somewhere to dance, or whether it's because it's a toddler group that need somewhere to meet and they don't really like Costa Coffee, it's that kind of a place. So you've naturally got the most interesting people in that area all coming together, and it's that kind of creative feel to it. So I suppose I don't think it's so much what we do as what we enable other people to do. So we're working with the local homeless organisation on doing a music project. We're going to try and create a music hub for these kind of young people who are dealing with homelessness, and that's come from them saying, we would like somewhere to do this, please. You seem like a really good fit. How about that? And it's in a funny sort of way. It's almost different, I think, that we've had increasing financial pressure, but I don't feel like we've been steered by it. It's just that something new has always popped up and filled that space. So, we've noticed people drinking a lot less alcohol on gig shows. And some of that is because we do quite a lot of work with young people, so we have quite a lot of young people coming through. They're not drinking. But equally, there'll be something else spring up. So our classes and workshops have just turned into this huge money spinner that we did it because it was such a great thing to do.
But
people wanted to learn.
Is that part of the remit as well? It's not just the kind of business from 8 o'clock till 11 o'clock or 8 o'clock till 1 o'clock. It's the daytime business as well. It's really important.
And increasingly so for us, we were never that busy in the daytime. It was all about the evenings. And it was still, we did drama 2 days a week, and then we'd have some comedy and some theatre and some folk and some rock. But the daytimes have started to really grow as well. So but
I guess also if
the whole thing.
If your activities are entirely nocturnal, you're only getting part of the local community. There's like whole swathes that just, for whatever reasons, for family reasons or work reasons, can't go in the evening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's always another avenue to explore. There's always another thing that you can be doing. There's something you haven't thought of, or that somebody wants to be doing something.
So a quiet building's a kind of a wrong building then. You need kind of people and bustle and the doors opening all the time.
The crucial thing for me is the more people who come through, the more people use it, value it, the more people have ideas, and then those ideas, some of them will be financially viable ideas. And some of them won't be, and that's fine. And we've done quite a bit of spoken word, and that has never been a money spinner, but it feels really exciting.
Is that a thing that you have to be open to these things, and you just go, let's give it a go, even if it doesn't work?
Yeah, it's about supporting people to what their next step is, and sometimes their next step is within our venue, and that is the next step. Other times it's helping them get to somewhere else. So we've had quite a lot of people in the industry who've come through us. So guitar techs and backline people, sound engineers, production managers, and we haven't tried to hold on to them. If we find somebody good, then we try to help them go to the next place, and that in itself. So we've done music industry days where we've brought back some of those people. So the guitar tech for Iron Maiden came back, and he did his talk to a whole load of 16-year-olds on this is an option for you. This is something you can do, and that was so much stronger knowing it was one of the kids who'd come to the venue in the first place, and then he's coming back to help these other kids. It's like a cyclical thing.
It's almost like a finishing school for the arts, and these people come in, they cut their teeth. They don't have to necessarily walk with a book on their head and know how to kind of get in and out of taxis.
Maybe that would be what we should teach them.
What you never know. Well, you've got the experiment. Mal, talk about your venue in terms of kind of how you fit into the community and what you feel your remit is.
I think that the sort of spirit of activism is kind of in the bricks and mortar of the Trades Club. It was built in 1924 with subs from people who in trade unions put their subs into this building and built it. And it's now, we've got an interesting setup in that our landlords are the Labour Party. The Labour Party own the building. The Trades Club works within a socialist members club who are kind of sitting tenants and have had different degrees of different relationships with Labour Party over the years, and then I'm kind of in the middle of that. So there's always been a lot of activism around the Trades Club, similar kind of almost like an anarchist type of thing. It comes from that kind of ethos. But the one thing that I found when I started kind of moving up the live venue side of things, it's very easy for people to sort of think, oh, well, you're not interested in this side of things anymore because it's all about la-di-da, So part of my job is I don't think you can kind of be static as like a as a hub, as a community hub, because you always have to keep reaching out to people all the time. Not everyone is super confident, and Bolshin is going to knock on your door saying, I want to put an event here. So you have to find ways of reaching out to them and saying to them, look, if you want to do something here, we can help you do it. You know, I can make a poster for you. Have you thought about doing this for your event? You know, so, you know, just trying to nurture that process, I think.
Well, there's kind of a dichotomy there. You're a grassroots venue, but you can't let the grass grow under your feet. There you go. There's your sales banner for you. Jane, can you talk about the Roundhouse, because it's kind of multiple venues inside one giant. It's like a transformer venue almost. So I guess you're kind of by far, in terms of capacity, the biggest venue here, but you can probably be running several things simultaneously. So kind of talk about how that all fits in here.
I think it's really interesting how everybody's referencing the sort of activist and slightly alternative and counterculture history of their own buildings, actually.
This is basically a nightmare for Theresa May, this panel.
And so obviously we were, you know, at the heart of London counterculture in the late 60s. There's a really interesting documentary coming out, plug, in about a week's time. It's an arena documentary about the last 50 years of the Roundhouse. And there's just this one interview with John Savage in it, and he just said this one line that really stuck with me, which was, it was a place that you used to go when you needed somewhere to go. And so I think we've always been this kind of, you know, magnet, actually, for very different groups. And over the years, you know, we hosted the Dialectics of Liberation in the late 60s, which was the hippies and the Black Panther movement in the same conference together. And the Panthers were kind of going, you know, we need to go out there and we need to be activists. And the hippies are going, no, we need to throw flowers in front of it. And it's always been a place for discussion and for people coming together, I think. I think, you know, I'm very lucky to come into a role where part of the refurbishment was this vision for young people. And that's, you know, I know a lot of arts organisations and venues, more arts organisations, I'll say, who will say that education is at the heart of everything that they do, but I really believe that we actually do that day in, day out here.
Yeah. And I guess that almost feels a little bit counterintuitive, because if you go like, get who's got the most disposable income, it's kind of people in their 30s or 40s or above. Young people don't really have much disposable income, but you've almost got a duty of care to have a space for these people.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, we live in quite an interesting, the venue lives in quite an interesting geographical location of London, where you've got Primrose Hill on one side and some really poor estates on the other side. Obviously, we're here for everybody, but I think, you know, for us and all of the team here, you know, especially with all of the cuts that are continuing to happen in arts education, we feel very much that it's our place to supplement what's being constantly destroyed by government.
Yeah, Rebecca?
Again, coming from a commercial point of view, I think every person in this room who has a venue, you're not in this business for the short term. Everyone in this room is here for the long term. And what you're going to remember in terms of picking up from that is every 14-year-old will eventually be an 18-year-old. Every 14-year-old will eventually be a 30-year-old who will have that disposable income. We don't put on 14 to 17-year-old club nights because they're fun. Trust me, they're not. They are some of the most testing times in my employment at my fair venue. But those 14-year-olds eventually will be bringing their friends back when they turn 18. They will be coming to the gigs. I know Jack Daniels is a sponsor here, but we're still in discussion in terms of sponsorship with those and things like that. But one of the hurdles we need to go over is that they can't really do much in terms of sponsoring shows over 18 because of the legalities of alcohol, which is very fair. And they said, well, can't you just do 18 plus shows? I'm like, well, no. I can't do an 18 plus only show. Even if just 10% of my audience is under 18, that's still 90 tickets I can't sell. And that is potentially 180 customers I could potentially lose in the future because they probably bring their girlfriend, boyfriend, best mate to that gig. So that's something that I'm never going to agree to because essentially, what was it Whitney Houston said? It's like children are our freaking future. So
okay. Jin, you used the C word there, the cuts word, which is... sorry, I was didn't intend to shock you in that way. But you've got, I guess, maybe it's a generalisation to say, but every time you have a Conservative government, it's the war on arts is the big thing. But how does that work? You've obviously got a government strategy, but then you've got the local councils, and you might have, particularly in London, you might have a lot of Labour, left-wing, liberal councils. How does that issue of kind of dealing with the council, the regulations, the red tape, the funding that you can apply for, how does that apply for each of your venues, and how do you navigate your way through that? Because I guess every time there's a change in the council, or if a different kind of party takes control, that could either massively benefit you or massively kind of hinder you.
From my side, it's an interesting one. We're part of Hampshire Cultural Trust, and that is an organisation that is funded partly by Hampshire County Council and partly by different borough and district councils. So in our own case, we get some of that money coming from Hampshire County Council and also some from Rushmore Borough Council. So although we've come from this kind of odd, anarchic kind of doing things for yourself culture, we're actually, we've got quite a few Conservative councillors who are on our kind of patch, who are interested in what we do. They come along to our advisory meetings, and you have to explain to them why you're doing these things. And it's a bit of a balancing act, really. But we've been incredibly fortunate that the sort of benefits that we can show, everybody goes, oh, well, that's definitely a good thing, that's fine. And it was interesting, I mean, this isn't on community, but it was interesting listening earlier about all these rules and regulations that were put in with the licensing. We had loads of stuff stuck on us that I can't remember now. It's like a page of A4 with different criteria. And then I had a chat with them, and they came over and we had a cup of tea, and she said, well, you don't want that in, do you? That could stop your business. I was like, it could, thanks very much. And we literally sat down and worked it out as two humans. And I just said, well, that's not ideal. And she'd say, well, do you want to cross it out? And I said, yeah, I would, yeah. And she said, well, okay, we'll cross that one out. And it was the most amicable. So I think if you can, like I say, we've been quite fortunate because we've been in that world where you have to be sensitive and political and delicate. So I've sort of been schooled in it. I've been schooled in softening some of it. But there are definite benefits to working quite closely with anyone who's got an interest and explaining to all of those people about what you might be able to deliver for them. Because actually, although, we've got Labour councillors who come along and who say, it's great that it's still here, really proud of it. We've also got Conservative councillors who say, you're starting people's careers and you're making self-made people out of them, and isn't it great what you're doing for the young? And it's just people. All of it is people, and you just need to strip a lot of that away. But
is that one of the measurements where some people are measuring you on a cultural level, and others are measuring you on an economic level?
Yes, and that is definitely. I have found that harder in recent years because we're part of an organisation that has to justify what it's doing, and its broad vision is fine. It's we want to encourage world-class culture in Hampshire. Okay, good. Yeah, so do I. Yeah. There's lots of those. The broad brush stuff is fine, but occasionally you'll get a particular target that you just think, well, I don't think that's really us. So I just kind of skirt round the things that are terrible and do more of the things that are brilliant.
That's a nice one. That's how you should live your life in general, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mal, in terms of kind of what you're doing and how you navigate the choppy seas of local councils.
Yeah. I think for us it's been really pretty straightforward. We get no funding at all ever because of our complicated semi-political kind of grey area setup. There's absolutely no chance of any funding ever. People come along to us and say, very well done. Oh, can you help us? No. I would say in relation to the cuts, one thing that we've been really aware of are, people in our community who are really hard hit by the cuts, and we've had things like we have the I don't know if you know the Real Junk Food Company. So they're basically people who they use food that supermarkets supply them that would have been thrown away, and people come in and it's pay what you feel. We do regular fundraisers for our food banks and pass the bucket round at gigs and things like that. you know, because, you know, in I suppose, you know, echoing what you said about, you know, Primrose Hill over here, and councillors say, you know, Hebden Bridge in some ways is like a picture postcard town. But, you know, if you scratch the surface, there's a lot of... Did anyone see Happy Valley? Anyway, if you scratch the surface, you know, there's a lot of, you know, it's quite desperate for quite a lot of people. So, you know, we really do what we can to try and help people in those who are really up against it.
Okay, Rebecca, in terms of kind of how it fits into what Sheffield Council's doing and that kind of stuff, how do you...
We don't get any local funding whatsoever.
But do you have to kind of navigate some of the council regulations about what the venue does and that kind of thing?
I'm not really the person who would really know that much, unfortunately. So in terms of the things that we do in working with the local councils, I'm trying to think. Sorry. We don't really have that much to do with local councils. Well, we do. We stick to the rules and regulations that they have. People, in terms of cuts, obviously we're seeing people either less through the door, or if the people are coming through the door, they're spending less, and that's in terms of the cuts and things like that. What we do is try and make all our things as accessible as possible. I mentioned earlier that we have a lot of studios above our offices that we sublet at a very discounted rate to help local enterprises actually get off the ground when local funding isn't an option for them. I mean, it's not an option for us, but it's also not an option for a lot of other people. So we help them out that way. And
so it's kind of almost like an incubator program.
Yeah,
almost.
I'd like to think of that. We really nurture, whether it's the local bands. I mean, the bands are getting hard cuts in terms of the funding they get from labels, so we're helping them in terms of putting them on our stage. But yeah, that's basically a story. I'm not the best to answer that question.
No, that's fine. Jane, in terms of kind of how is Camden Council nice to deal with? Are they supportive?
I want to ask Greg from the Electric Ballroom that question. He's standing at the back there. He probably has more dealings with them face to face than I do.
They're actually very good. They're very good. It's worth having a decent relationship with the local council. Because although they're the ones who put all the rules and regulations on you, at the same time you can have a two-way relationship with them and work alongside them for the benefit.
I think we're really lucky. We're in Camden. It's a recognised music part of town, isn't it? So, you know, there's a desire and propensity to support that and to keep that side of the economy going. I think from a Roundhouse perspective, there's a lot, you know, this building stood empty for many, many years and it was really desolate, and I think there was a real desire from a lot of local community that it succeed. And I think since we've reopened, the work we do with young people, you know, I think that's really feeding back to us as well. So I think the council recognise us and the other venues in Camden as being a very important part of the economy. One of my favourite recent stories of the Roundhouse is in 2011 when the riots happened in London, and those who were out on the streets rioting were all sort of instant messaging each other. The message went round, "Don't touch the Roundhouse," and the rest of the street kind of got the windows smashed in, and nothing happened to this building because there was an awareness of what we provide for the community as well.
Right. Okay. And in terms of the things that you put on, obviously you want to have a balance of having stuff that will appeal to the community and kind of almost serving a public service remit, but you've also got to kind of pay the bills. You've got to pay your staff and your rent and pay for renovations and those sorts of things. How much of that, though, is an element of box tick? And do you feel that you're compelled to put on certain things because it makes your remit look eclectic and inclusive? And can you talk about those balances? Because you could maybe kind of surrender some of that in the pursuit of just kind of the high ticket big earners. So how does that all work for you?
For us, that's, as I said, I think before, quite a delicate economic balance. About a third of our year in the main space is commercial promoters coming in. About a third of the year is our own programming, and about a third of the year we hire out for all sorts of corporate events, award ceremonies, even weddings and bar mitzvahs if you can afford it. So for us, it's constantly looking at the balance. Obviously, a lot of people know us primarily as a music venue, but we also invest quite heavily in our spoken word programme, in contemporary theatre and dance, and lots of other things that I've probably forgotten off the top of my head. But I think having that mixed genre offer means we can also provide things like the beach in the summertime, which is very, very popular with a lot of local communities. We also try and go out to residents and offer them free tickets and invitations to come and see stuff.
Okay.
I think for me, if I look at the calendar, a good month for me is I see some blinding bands of different genres and artists and community events. Hopefully those blinding bands and artists have got spaces for local emerging talent to support them, and that hasn't been cut off by the agents anyway. So great artists, emerging talent supporting them, community groups, fundraisers, awareness raising events. You know, if I look across a month and I go, okay, you know, it doesn't always happen that you get the balance right, but that's for me, when I look across the calendar month and I see that, I think, okay, that's good. That's where it should be.
Okay, Rebecca.
One thing that everyone knows a Leadmill to be is what I would consider a brilliant northern live music venue that really kind of sets the stage for bands to come to. Unfortunately, nurturing young local bands doesn't pay our bills, it doesn't pay our staff. So what we try to do is get a good mix of getting those local bands on the bigger bills, which is not always possible. One thing that we do like to do is, especially my team, is work very closely with the local bands, educate them on how to promote themselves, how to work their own band as a business. And we're very kind of, not picky, but we try and put the right programs together and try and make them as break-even as possible. But essentially, the bigger bands touring is what's going to pay for that. So a lot of our local band shows are pretty much loss leaders, but it's how we see us investing in the city and in the culture, the live music culture in our city. It's all about investing in that. I mean, we don't have that great deal of community projects within the walls. I'd like to see more, but it's not always financially viable for us to do that. But I'd like to say that what we do in terms of working with the local bands and investing our time, our effort, our expertise in helping them get a platform is what we would like to do.
And what role is kind of alternative funding playing in this? You like some of you are kind of run as purely commercial enterprises. Some might benefit from some injection of money from the local council. But I'm thinking specifically like lottery grants, but also increasingly a move towards sponsorship. You talked about this issue of do we have Jack Daniels as a sponsor, and what does that mean for under 18? So how important is that, the role of the brand and these alternative revenue sources coming in, and do they come in with certain expectations of what you're going to do with that?
We were very lucky in the noughties and the 90s and even in the 80s, to, as many venues did, to have a lot of money coming in, and then the recession happened, and then we weren't getting that money in. We're just starting out, branching out now, looking for commercial sponsorship. Unfortunately for us, we're not an option for Arts Council. We're not an option for lottery funding. We're not an option for a lot of strands of funding. There's way too many hoops to jump through. Unfortunately, we are a profit-making business. We have a director to pay. As much as we would really like to get those pots of money, they're just not viable for us. But then there's also the option now is commercial sponsorship. There's a lot of commercial sponsorship out there that I'm sure would love to sponsor us, but they're just not the right brand for us. We're very proud of the Leadmill brand and what it brings to the city of Sheffield and what it brings to live music in terms of the UK economy. So I guess we are being pretty picky with who we work with and what we work with. We're just undertaking a massive rebrand and a massive refurbishment at the moment. The majority of it now has been, well, all of it has been funded by ourselves. we're about, I think, we're on phase 1 at the moment, and there's about 10 phases to go through. But we're showing that we are willing to invest in ourselves, and we're just trying to find the right sponsorship deal at the moment. So if anyone's out there that wants to give us money that would fit with the Leadmill, please come and see us. But yeah, we are being pretty picky about who we work with and making sure it does fit with the brand. We're still having conversations with Jack Daniels. That's not off the table, but in terms of cutting out under 18s, that's never going to be an option as far as I'm concerned.
Right, okay.
It's interesting that idea of the right brand and knowing what you're giving up is that everything, although at the moment we are getting funded, it costs you something to do that. It costs you, everything good has got a price with it. So we are controlled to some degree in what we can do, the kind of things that we can do, the way that we can work, the speed that we can work. If you're a local promoter and you own your own venue and you want to pay someone 20 quid to go flyering, you just pay them 20 quid to go flyering. I have to write into someone to say, please, could we employ a flyerer? Then I have to provide a business document as to why that would be a good idea. And then someone checks that with the board and they say, oh, we're not sure about that. Can you provide more evidence? By which time the gig's gone. Do you know? So you're planning ahead in a very unusual way. And it's the same sponsorship. We do a festival in the summer that's just inside the venue, where we lay turf through the venue and make it feel like a festival. And it's amazing, but this is the first year that we've had it sponsored. We've been doing it 10 years. And it was the first time that someone's just said, oh, it sounds like a great idea, we'd love to help you do that. Yeah. And they didn't want anything in return, and they didn't need massive banners everywhere. They just wanted a little logo on the poster and the feeling that they'd helped. And I think it's worth waiting to get the right thing for your place.
But I guess also you've kind of got a duty to your community and your audience for the type of sponsor you have, because without naming them, I spoke to somebody who ran a club in a major Northern European city, and they were approached and offered a lot of money from one of those payday loan companies, and they said, well, our entire audience is kind of young working class kids, and we can't consciously go and promote this kind of thing that could end up in a kind of lifetime of debt. And they said that they thought about it for about half a second. They just went, we can't, because we've got a duty of care to our audience not to do these kind of things. That's a really extreme example, but I suppose that's something that's always kind of at the back of your mind, that this sponsorship has to be right for the venue, but it's got to be right for the audience.
Yeah,
the payday loan
absolutely.
wouldn't work for the trades club.
No.
We could do with a payday loan, but no. We haven't. I don't think we've done any kind of sponsorship. We have done, our partnerships have been more, we have done some creative partnerships. So we've done things with Heavenly Records. So they have their 25th birthday at the club, and we're doing 4 days with them in January. And Faber as well. We do the Faber Social with like the Northern Outpost for that. So, but even within those, it's because that we've got similar kind of ideals, and that's why it works.
I was just going to say really briefly, I think fundraising and partnerships are absolutely, there's no way we're going to get around it. These are all essential things that we need to be looking at for the future as funding, as public funding is cut and cut. I think, I know that a lot of smaller venues, there's one person running everything. There's one person doing all of the marketing, all of the ticketing, all of the programming, probably some of the maintenance sometimes. But I think, I don't know whether it's something we should bring up with Mark and Bev as, is there one independent fundraiser that we could all get in contact with, because, the return on your investment for that is you're going to see it. And I think, there are pots of money out there, whether it be through sponsorship or through various trusts, and you just need some help to access it, I think, because I know people are daunted by, the enormity of the form that you have to fill in.
I'm guessing in this job there's a lot of forms to be filled in, and there's a lot of meetings to be had all the time, and it's not kind of why you open a venue. You want to give something back to the community, you want to put arts on, but then you just have all of this admin.
But there are professional people out there that just do those forms, and are really, really good. And I think it's going to be a developing career in the future in the arts. It's so important. Our fundraising team has a huge target they have to meet every year, and I think it's a very, very tough job. But they're experts in that field, so.
Yeah, but then they give you the kind of the breathing space to get on to do the stuff that you're there to do.
I think one of the problems that we have kind of faced whilst looking for the funding pots and things like that is typically, and I know Bev and Mark know this more than I do, is that they typically want to fund projects and not really want to fund infrastructure.
Yeah. Right.
We have a dance floor that hasn't had, is about 10 years expired its life. So we are desperate in need of money to replace our dance floor. The Arts Council aren't going to fund that. They'll fund a gig project which we will have already pre-booked and took a gamble on, for them to fill in lots of forms, to tick all these boxes, for them to be told, well, you don't really fall in that right category, we're not going to give you any money, and then that's how we've ended up. So we're having to think a lot more outside the box in terms of how we're going to fund our projects. We've replaced our own PA system, we've replaced our lights. The next phase is replacing the dance floor. It's going to cost a lot of money, and it's kind of weighing up, okay, what staff can we pay? None of our staff are going to be having any pay rises for a long time, because we've got to pay for this dance floor unless someone comes in and is able to help us fund that. In return, we give them content. In return, we give them our space for their corporate events. I mean, we're not asking to, well, we don't want to be limiting ourselves to what we do as a company. What we are offering is the content, offering the brand for them to show off that, look, we're helping that independent venue in Sheffield that's been going around 36 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I would agree, actually. That idea of somebody fundraising for small venues, I think it would be a very, not easy, but it would be a quick win if we can pull it off, would be amazing.
Just somebody that can kind of be shared across multiple venues, and that's their job, is that
It's
they
somebody
going
who
out.
loves filling in forms.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's that person.
yeah, absolutely.
That's not me. I hope this
But
is a
that's-
job interview.
But it's also that thing of, I can't stand forms. Anyone who knows me well would know. You're laughing. I can't bear it. I've got a real phobia with the whole affair. But we're now in the South West Arts Council region, and they've been really helpful and really supportive. And we've put together a thing called Rushmore Arts Hub, which our borough is called Rushmore. And as part of that, there is a youth grants pot, and we've given out grants of up to £1,000 to young people to do something artistic with, and that's been really good. And it's actually been a relatively pain-free experience. So if there's something, it won't fix your dance floor, but it might enable you to do something. Like, we've done networking, we've done all sorts of bits through it and training through it that is the work we would have wanted to do anyway. And in the past, I would have just gone, we'll just find the money. And this time, we've had the money to be able to do it with. And so I wouldn't say don't approach it. I think rock venues and rock promoters, and I speak as a rock promoter, we've got a natural fear of it, of like, oh man, there's loads of forms and they're going to ask me questions and stuff. And actually, when you calm yourself down and look at it, everything that everyone is doing in this room is great. And the Arts Council would love the kind of audiences and feedback and results that everyone's getting. I don't know a venue that isn't helping young people. I don't know a venue that isn't trying to be accessible for everybody. They're good things, and they're quite often run as a commercial venture. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing too. That's making the local area flourish and work. The amount of money that we're bringing into our areas.
I'd
Hebden
love to
Bridge
meet your Arts Council person.
I'd tell you what, it's been a bit of an eye-opener for me, because I've had a few meetings over the years. I mean, I've been doing this a long time, and I've had a few meetings with people who said, we'll only fund you if you do specifically that sort of theatre, or we'll only fund you if you do this particular niche of that. And I've met really great ones as well. We used to have a music officer in the southeast who was fantastic, and she basically brought together this world music consortium of venues, and we all learnt from each other, and it was amazing. So it's possible. You just have to let them know that you're up for doing stuff, and then say no to the things that don't fit you. Do you know what I mean? It would be worth getting them to the venue and having a drink with them and just seeing what things you already do that they feel a natural synergy with, that aren't about getting money. It's about what you want to do. So your stuff with local bands, that could be funded.
We've been down that whole avenue.
Oh, no, really?
We really have. Elise, our brand manager, she was brought in specifically for that reason, and it's just for the Leadmill, for what we're doing. it is a complete and utter no-go. It's just not an option, unfortunately. I mean, it is an option for so many venues and so many arts groups and so many community hubs, which is absolutely brilliant for you guys, but it really isn't an option for the Leadmill. We just don't tick the right boxes, I'm afraid.
No, it's a shame.
Right, conscious of time, I think we should probably go to the audience and see if we've got any questions. I'm going to do running around with the mic. So, lady over here, I'll come over and. Oh, right, okay then. Well, see, I was well ahead of you. First question, this gentleman here.
Sorry, it's not a question. I just got something to add, if that's all right. Basically, cool. Firstly, I just wanted to mention something that hasn't been mentioned yet, that if you are a grassroots community hub and you lease or rent your building, you should immediately register as an asset of community value. Yeah. This is the thing that the government put in under the Localism Act 2011. If successful, it means that the freeholder has to give a 6-month notice period before they sell the freehold of the property, and community groups can apply to become the owner of that property. It also gives it, as of sort of August last year, it gives it extra protection in planning legislation. So that's an asset of community value. The other thing is that if you are registered as a non-profit, as I know a lot of people have probably considered doing today after hearing some of the speakers, and you are a grassroots community hub, then you should contact a company called the Plunkett Foundation. They've been contracted by the government to administer a scheme called the More Than a Pub scheme. Now, chances are, if you're a small venue, if you're a 100 to 200 capacity venue, you're probably attached to a bar or a pub, and you're probably eligible for this scheme. So again, if you rent or lease your building, the government has put a £3.5 million budget to one side to assist local communities in purchasing properties.
Okay, that's the first time we've ever had a series of very good bullet points rather than a question, but thank you for that. Do we have a question? Oh, here we go. Proximity, this is good.
I'm going to add that with the ACV thing, the only thing I'd say is have a word with your landlords as well, because in our particular things, we're with a pubco, and if we were to go down the ACV route, I know that all our prices would go through the roof, and that would kill me. But anyway, one of the big challenges that I find is that because we're seen as a commercial enterprise, people say is getting the engagement with the community, because there are lots of arts foundation courses going on. There's an arts barge, there's all sorts where everyone goes, yes, I want to get behind that. You're a business, you should do it by yourself. Asking the panel, how has you managed to get that engagement? I know possibly more for the Leadmill because it is more of a commercial thing. How have you managed to get that engagement, or is it just finding the right people to work with?
Thank you.
Just a lot of, like you said, finding the right people to work with. There's occasionally, the Sheffield City Council occasionally sends out a round robin of things that they'll help fund in terms of courses. A lot of the time they're totally pointless and not really anything to do with us. I know it's not answering your question, but we've basically just learned from trial and error and just working ourselves. We've not had much of help really, other than working ourselves and trying things and reading up and researching. We've just basically done it all ourselves, I'm afraid. Like you said, as soon as you say that you're a business, a lot of doors get, a commercial business, a lot of doors get closed in your face, and you should be able to fund it yourself. A lot of people here know that that's not an option because the money is very tight, especially when you're doing 80-85% splits for bands. You've got staff to pay, you've got security to pay. It's not really a massive option. What we have done is invested in a lot of internships and a lot of placement students, which they brought a wealth of knowledge through their universities and their college courses, but we've been able to pass on to them. They're like sponges, they just absorb all this information. So that's one thing that we've done in terms of not essentially cheap labour, it's a lot of funded labour, and it's kind of subsidised by a lot of different college groups and things like that. And then we have taken them on full-time and are paying them a full-time wage now. But that's another route that we've gone down, where they're learning at school or a university or college whilst also learning on the job with us. Don't know if that answers your question, unfortunately.
Okay, do we have time for maybe one more question before the clock strikes us dead? No. Well, I've got one question, which is, I guess, kind of advice for people if they're opening a venue. like in an area they feel that, okay, there's a need for a grassroots venue. What are the kind of the obvious pitfalls that they will encounter, and how can they kind of prepare for that? Because I guess the odds of opening any kind of venue, the odds are automatically stacked against you. It's a high risk venture. So particularly something that's going to have this community focus, what are the big pitfalls? What are the things that they have to be really, really conscious of before they kind of open their doors or even think about opening their doors?
I think for me, the first thing, the first thing that would spring to mind would be location, knowing your neighbourhood, knowing your audience, and making sure that you're looking at a mixed economy, so you're not just a commercial space for a short period of time in the day.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I would have echoed location. It's one thing that sometimes we struggle with because of the way we're situated in town. Unfortunately, we can't pick up a 400-year-old mill and put it in the middle of the centre of Sheffield. I'd love to pick it up and take it to Manchester sometimes, but that's not an option either. Definitely location. And again, knowing your audience 100%. It's pointless us at the Leadmill. I'd love to put on some really obscure electronic contemporary arts type music, but I just know for a fact that no one from Sheffield would buy tickets. However, I know that every time the twang comes through town, it will sell out like clockwork. So
there you go. Well, that's knowing your audience. You might not necessarily agree with your audience, but you have to know them.
I think it's funny when you see photographs of these really amazing happenings like Pink Floyd here or the exploding plastic inevitable in New York and stuff. You look at the photos and there's about 15 people there. All the Sex Pistols, there's about 15 people at the art school. So lower your expectations. What would I say? I'm a big believer in community. I thought it was very chilling, the phrase that someone said earlier, that if we're not careful, we'll be a nation of commuters with nowhere to call home. I think that if you start any kind of business, you need to talk to people and talk to your neighbours and find out what the local issues are and reach out to people and see how you can help. I think it's everybody's responsibility to do that. If you have a venue or if you don't, I think it's really vital. Okay,
and Barney, I think you get the final word by default.
If you knew enough, then you wouldn't open a venue, would you?
Here we go. We're ending on a diner, aren't we?
I think there's something to be said for that naivety that makes you think, yeah, do you know what I'd love to do is run a venue, and I sort of, with that caveat, I think you can always chew through more money than you realised. You can always stumble against legal objections you didn't know existed. And if you're going to do community stuff, you need to have child protection policy really well thought through. So just think it all through, but don't think it up so much that you never do it, because it's too good.
There we go. Okay, and on that note, if we can thank all our speakers. Thank you all.